Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. For those of you that like to get to the juicy story where you have the straightforward Bigfoot encounter, well, I've got that for you on this channel right now. But the full stories are really worth listening to, and I've got them listed at the bottom, because really, just the Bigfoot encounter without the whole experience from the beginning to the middle and the end is really worth listening to. But if you just want to get to the juicy encounter that people have sent in to me, by all means, here are a few examples of them right now on my channel. So get straight into the business, shall we? And let's get started. One evening I was driving down the road and came upon a hit-and-run accident. I say that because there was a woman lying in the middle of the road, bleeding out furiously, and it looked like someone had driven over her legs as they had been severed from her body and were lying yards away from her torso. It was the most horrific sight I've ever seen. It seemed incredulous to me that she was still actually alive. I could hardly believe what I was seeing, and in that moment I wasn't sure quite how to react, because I was so shocked by this frightfully macabre and gruesome sight. My heart was pounding violently in my chest, and I could see the woman looking up at me in the truck with these anguished, disheartened eyes that appeared to be begging me to help her. I immediately called 911, although I knew it was far too late for this woman, and she probably had only moments left to live, but I knew that I didn't want her to die all alone without making an effort to finally comfort her. What on earth was I going to say to someone who had seconds left to live, I wondered in horror. I was not good at consoling people at the very best of times. Maybe she had a message she wanted me to convey to a loved one, I thought. I climbed out of my truck hastily and ran towards the middle of the road, but the woman was not there. The tarmac of the highway was undisturbed, still warm from the day, and very smooth, and there was absolutely no evidence of blood staining anywhere. Was I going stark raving mad, I wondered to myself. I was beginning to wonder about my own mental faculties. Maybe I was overtired, too exhausted. Had I been driving too long? Was I now hallucinating? Yet I know what I saw, and the picture was embedded in my mind like a graving on a tombstone. You don't just imagine things like that, with such vivid recall. It was not even conceivably possible. My imagination wasn't even that good. I was certain I'd seen a woman lying in the middle of the road, dying after a hit-and-run accident, and now I was beginning to ambiguously doubt what I'd actually seen. When the emergency services did arrive, I explained to them what I'd seen and apologised profusely that I must have been seeing things, because what I'd seen had been so vivid and so clear to me. One of the EMTs asked me to report what I'd seen to her, and she went as white as a sheet when I recalled what I believed I had just witnessed on the road. I watched the colour literally drain from her face in horror. Her eyes grew as round as saucers, and her chin hung in an open, fixed gasp. What you saw was very real and incredibly accurate, she reassured me. I was here when I attended to a woman a year ago. She was lying in the middle of the road, having been mown down by a hit-and-run driver on the spot of the highway a year earlier, exactly as you described. The woman you recounted fits her description so perfectly, down to the very last detail. Her legs were indeed severed in the way you describe, and she bled out and was dead before we were able to attend to her medically. Now I was the one that was shaking. Well, what the heck did I see then? I asked the EMT. The EMT tried to calm me down. I don't know how to say this to you, but I think you actually saw her ghost, she told me. But don't feel bad about calling us out like this. It's not the first time something weird and as crazy as this has happened to us. I assure you it's not as uncommon as you might actually think. I remember getting back into my truck and shaking violently as I watched the ambulance service leave. I was trembling as I put the key into the ignition again. And then, I couldn't believe it, I saw the ghost of the pleading, desperate, dying woman all over again. Please, no, I begged. No, not again. This is just too much. This is more than I can handle. I could not drive through the ghost again, that looked so real, so I climbed out of the truck to inspect the road, but there was nothing there. I really felt like I was going on bonkers, but I know what I saw. The road was still warm to the touch, but there was no sign of blood anywhere. I really was losing it, I thought. The ghost had appeared hauntingly real.
Feeling foolish, I got back into the truck, closed my eyes for a few more seconds to avoid seeing the frantic eyes of the ghostly apparition again, and then I hightailed it down that piece of highway as fast as I possibly could. It was a very creepy, insidious feeling that did not leave me for a very long time. It still makes me feel nauseous and queasy when I visit that memory again, as it is a night I cannot forget in a hurry. One night I was driving down the highway, and I very nearly narrowly missed running over a seemingly beautiful woman that was wearing a very expensive, glamorous fox fur coat, and had suddenly just waddled into the road with a purposeful intent, oblivious to the impending danger of my truck. I remember saying, "What the heck, woman? Why don't you look where you're going? I nearly ran you over." I immediately braked and climbed out of my truck just to check if the woman had recovered from the stunned shock of being nearly run over by my truck. What was she doing in the middle of the highway, wandering around at this time of the night, I wondered. All kinds of horrifying thoughts went rushing through my head, like, was she escaping from a dangerous man or something like that? Could she be possibly in need of my help? I was not prepared for what I was about to see. As you can imagine, it was the 80s, and I was not sure what on earth this extraordinary, peculiar creature actually was. My first thought was, what the heck is this? I had initially thought the 4-foot person was a stunningly beautiful woman wearing a luxurious, glamorous fox fur. But the red fox coat was not a fur coat at all, but a creature that was covered from head to toe in long, luxurious red hair. What on earth was this exceptional creature, I wondered over and over again to myself. I'd never seen anything remotely like it before. It looked like a cross between a human and an ape. I know of no other way to describe it to you. It was standing at the edge of the highway, looking frightened and with very large, big golden brown eyes that seemed dazed, disorientated, and very shocked. The poor creature was trembling with fear because it was so human-like. It was the most natural thing for me to do to comfort it. I think it knew that it had narrowly missed being killed by my truck. "I'm so sorry," I said. "Are you all right?" I reached out to touch one of the hairy arms, and the creature seemed to be momently comforted by my touch. I continued to stroke the creature's arm reassuringly, not knowing what else to do, and it started to make these strange whimpering sounds that sounded really remarkably like a distraught dog. The irony is that the creature even smelt like a dog. It smelt like a wet dog, so to speak. Suddenly gliding across the road towards us were 2 gargantuan forms, the likes of such I've never seen before, and judging by the severe look on their hairless leather faces, they were far from happy, but their irate, frenetic anger was not directed towards me, but to the creature I narrowly missed running over. I realized almost immediately that the little creature was their beloved Sprog, and like any concerned parent, they were happy and fraught all at the same time to be reunited with their little one. For a while I could hear the mother chattering away to her young one in what appeared to be an angry gibberish. The little Sprog looked up at its mother with big, wide, open eyes and made a whimpering sound which clearly had the effect of pulling at her heartstrings, as she immediately stopped chattering and then ruffled his golden hair on his cone-shaped head as if to say, "It's all forgiven and forgotten, but don't you dare do that again to me." All the while the large male creature, who was clearly the father, never said a single word. But he went over to his youngling and also ruffled the hair on its head affectionately, which I realized must be an expression of love. Then the male stood before me and looked at me very intently with his deep-set golden-brown eyes that seemed to express extreme gratitude. He was literally standing only a foot away from me, so uncomfortably close, in fact, that I could see inside his flat nose, the pink nostrils, and when he breathed, he sounded exactly like a horse. I should have been absolutely terrified because he was so imposing and majestic and lofty and was about 10 foot tall, 1,000 pounds and 5 foot wide. It was like I was standing a foot away from King Kong himself, and I was trembling in my boots. Imagine my amazement when this colossal male put his gargantuan hand and sausage-like fingers on my shoulders and tapped me a couple of times with his overlong hairy hands, in what I believe was an expression of appreciation and extreme gratitude. Then he moved away from me, and I watched these 2 colossal ape-like humanoids that I now know to be Bigfoots glide seamlessly across the road, with the little one sitting on the father's shoulders looking very happy. I watched them take huge strides over the guardrail, down the embankment into the woods beyond. They were magnificent to watch, and as they moved their graceful bodies, they almost floated with a seamless grace. It took me years to get over that gratifying, effable experience, which was so magnificent, beautiful, shocking, and hair-raising, all at the very same time, because I had no idea what I'd encountered that day until many, many long years later, when the subject of Bigfoot was more openly discussed.
So there we are. That's the juicy bits of our stories tonight. I personally think you should go back and listen to the whole story because it makes it so much more exciting, because then you learn all about where it happened, the location, and all about the fabulous characters involved in the story. And that makes the story so much more gripping. But as I say so, go down to the description and then click on to the YouTube link, and then you will hear the whole story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.